Imagine you are like just finishing a really grueling 2-hour session with a client.
Oh, yeah, we've all been there.
Right. And when I say grueling, I mean the kind of session where you are literally sweating by the end of it. The client has been throwing items across the room. They're dropping their entire body weight to the floor, dead weight style, and, swiping every single learning material off the table the second you set it down.
A very heavy day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are completely exhausted. Your brain is just fried. So you pull out your tablet to write your final session notes before you pack up your car, and you type this single sentence into the software. You write, "He was being aggressive today because he was frustrated."
Uh-oh.
You hit submit. Seems perfectly normal, right? I mean, it sounds to any reasonable person like exactly what just happened in that room. But here is the massive hook for you listening right now. Using that single, seemingly harmless sentence is like injecting a virus into the computer system of your client's treatment plan.
That is exactly what it is.
It can completely corrupt the entire algorithm the clinical team is trying to build. It can invalidate weeks of your own hard-earned data, and it actually crosses a major ethical boundary in our field.
It sounds, incredibly dramatic when you frame it as a virus, but it is functionally true.
Yeah.
That one sentence in a clinical record corrupts the data pool.
Yeah.
And in applied behavior analysis, the data pool is literally the only thing keeping the treatment afloat.
Which brings us to the big question for you, the listener. Whether you are driving to your clinic right now or sitting at home prepping for your exam, are you accidentally using mentalistic language without even realizing it?
Most people are, honestly.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is an installment of Behavioral Intelligence con Mara Sanchez, powered by Amethyst Therapy Services. And this specific deep dive is a core part of our complete RBT Task List series.
The big one today.
It really is. Today, our mission is mastering Task List Item A.5, describing behavior and environment in observable and measurable terms. Okay, let's unpack this. Because this seemingly simple vocabulary shift, like learning how to just describe what you literally see with your eyes, is actually the absolute foundation of all applied behavior analysis. It is the bedrock.
It is the bedrock. It's the concrete foundation, the steel frame. I mean, whatever structural metaphor you want to use, it applies here.
Right.
To really understand why this matters so much, we have to step back and look at the massive stakes behind this specific skill. Every registered behavior technician, or RBT, absolutely needs this skill because the data obtained by measuring behavior is the primary material used to guide and evaluate all of our clinical work.
Every single decision.
Every decision. I want you to really internalize that. The graph is the only voice the client has when the supervisor isn't in the room. If the data on that graph is flawed, because it is based on an RBT's subjective feelings rather than observable facts, everything built on that data collapses. Yeah, the trend line is an illusion, the progress reports are basically fiction, and the subsequent treatment decisions are fundamentally flawed.
Think about your Tuesday afternoon client, the one you see every single week. When treatment decisions are wrong, it is that client who suffers the consequences, right? We aren't just talking about abstract lines on a graph. We are talking about their daily life, their ability to communicate, their progress toward independence.
Exactly. Accurate, objective descriptions ensure that we aren't stopping effective interventions prematurely just because an RBT sort of felt like it wasn't working.
Right.
And conversely, it ensures we aren't continuing ineffective or even harmful interventions just based on a technician's gut feeling about how a session went.
That is such a crucial clinical impact. And from an organizational standpoint, this is exactly why supervisors have such rigid expectations around documentation. Board-certified behavior analysts, or BCBAs, they rely heavily on RBTs to be their eyes and ears out in the field.
Because a BCBA cannot be at every session.
Right. They can't be there for every minute for every client. So they expect what we call treatment fidelity.
Yes. Treatment fidelity.
Let's pause there for a second because treatment fidelity is one of those terms that gets thrown around a lot in textbooks, but we really need to ground it. Treatment fidelity basically means following the recipe exactly as the chef wrote it, right?
That is a highly functional way to look at it, yeah.
Yeah.
If a master baker writes a recipe that calls for exactly 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and you, the apprentice, decide to throw in a tablespoon of salt instead because you just felt like it would be better, well, the cake is going to be ruined.
Totally ruined.
You didn't follow the recipe. In our field, treatment fidelity answers the question, are we doing what we said we would do in the behavior plan, and are we doing it the exact way we designed it?
Right.
But here is the structural flaw that happens all the time. Treatment fidelity is literally impossible to maintain if the target behavior isn't clearly defined to begin with.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right. If the RBT and the BCBA have two completely different ideas of what the word frustrated looks like in real life, they aren't measuring the same thing. The RBT might be measuring crying, while the BCBA thinks they are measuring table swiping.
And for you listening, especially if you are actively prepping for your exam right now, this isn't just theoretical. This is a heavily tested concept. You are going to see this crop up specifically under Domain A, which covers measurement, and Domain E, which is all about documentation and reporting.
You simply cannot pass the RBT exam without this.
No, you can't. Nor can you function ethically and effectively in the field without having this concept locked down into your muscle memory. So I want to take a step back here. Before we get into the mechanics of how to write these descriptions, I want to establish the baseline. We throw the word behavior around all the time.
All the time.
But what is the official scientific definition of behavior according to our field?
Well, if we look at the foundational literature, specifically the Cooper text, which most consider the encyclopedia of our field, alongside the Amistus Premium Study textbook, the definition is deceptively simple, but highly precise. Behavior is defined as the activity of a living organism.
Just the activity of a living organism.
That's it.
That feels incredibly broad. I mean, technically, my heart beating is the activity of a living organism.
It is, and technically that is behavior.
Wait, really?
Yes. Which is exactly why the science requires us to break that massive umbrella down into two distinct categories. First, we have what is called private or covert behavior.
Okay, covert behavior.
Right. These are events that occur within the skin of the organism. Thinking, feeling, your heart rate increasing, the sensation of a stomach ache. Now, it's really important to note that radical behaviorism, which is the underlying philosophy of ABA, originally championed by B.F. Skinner, it does not claim that feelings or thoughts don't exist.
Which is such a common myth.
A huge myth. Private events are real, physical events happening inside a human body.
Right. I always hear critics of ABA say, oh, you guys just treat people like robots and pretend they don't have emotions. But that isn't the case at all. We acknowledge the emotion exists.
We absolutely acknowledge it exists. The distinction is that private events are not directly observable by others. I cannot see your anxiety. I cannot measure the exact dimensions of your sadness.
Right. I could be hiding it perfectly.
Exactly. And because of that limitation, we cannot use private events as the functional explanation for public actions, nor can we reliably track them for data collection. This leads us to the second type, public or observable behavior.
Observable behavior.
Yes. These are actions that can be seen, heard, or recorded by another person standing in the room.
So translating this into the daily reality for our listener. In applied settings, when you are working on the floor of a clinic or in a family's living room or, shadowing a student in a middle school classroom, you must focus strictly on public behavior. If it cannot be seen or heard, meaning it meets the criteria for being observable, and if it cannot be counted or timed, meaning it meets the criteria for being measurable, it has absolutely no place in your clinical documentation.
Correct.
Yeah.
The data sheet is reserved exclusively for the public sphere.
Okay, so what does this all mean for the human being holding the clipboard? Because I have to push back here a little bit.
Go for it.
Isn't it completely unnatural for humans to just ignore feelings and only describe robotic, mechanical actions? I mean, we are empathetic, highly social creatures. Millions of years of evolution have wired our brains to read emotional intent.
Oh, for sure.
If a kid is crying because his favorite toy truck just snapped in half, my brain immediately says he is sad. It does not say the organism is producing fluid from the tear ducts and emitting vocalizations at a high decibel level.
Right.
Fighting that instinct feels almost cold.
Your pushback is not only valid, it actually highlights the #1 hurdle new behavior technicians face when entering this field. Our everyday descriptive language, like our entire social currency, is built on making rapid assumptions about other people's internal states.
Always.
If you see someone stomp their foot and cross their arms, you instantly label them angry so you know how to interact with them. But in applied behavior analysis, we have to fight that evolutionary urge. We have to use what are called operational definitions.
Operational definition.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have to strip away the assumptions because my personal definition of sad might involve crying loudly, but your personal definition of sad might involve a client shutting down, staring at the wall, and going entirely non-vocal.
Right. That looks completely different.
Exactly. If we both just write down the word sad on the data sheet, the data is entirely meaningless because we're tracking two different topographies of behavior under the exact same label.
That is the virus in the system right there. If I cover your shift on Wednesday and the plan says track instances of sadness, I might record 0 instances because the client didn't cry. But on Tuesday, you recorded 10 instances because the client was quiet.
Yeah.
The BCBA looks at the graph on Friday and thinks, wow, an amazing breakthrough happened on Wednesday, but nothing actually changed. We just defined the word differently in our own heads.
Precisely. The data is completely corrupted by subjectivity.
Mm-hmm.
So, to immunize our clinical work against this, the source material outlines 3 mandatory pillars of a perfect operational definition. Whenever you are reading a behavior plan or writing a session note, the description must be objective, clear, and complete.
Okay, let's break those down individually because these aren't just buzzwords. They are the filters every RBT needs to run their thoughts through. Let's start with objective.
Objective means the definition refers only to the observable characteristics of the behavior, actively stripping away any assumed intent, emotion, or internal state. You aren't guessing why it's happening, you are just recording what is physically happening.
Okay, give me an example.
You are replacing "he hit me because he was mad" with "he struck my shoulder with a closed fist."
Got it.
Next is clear.
Clear means the definition is readable and unambiguous. It is essentially the stranger test. If an experienced behavior technician who had never met this client before walked into the room, read your definition, and watched the client, they should be able to instantly recognize the behavior.
And accurately paraphrase what they are looking for without asking you any clarifying questions.
Exactly.
And the final pillar, complete. This one is where I see a lot of people stumble.
Complete means the definition delineates the exact boundaries of what is and what is not an instance of the behavior. It leaves 0 room for guessing by providing examples and non-examples.
Like outlining the edges.
Exactly. If the target behavior is elopement, which is our clinical term for running away a no, complete definition doesn't just say client runs. It specifies client moves more than 10 feet away from the therapist without permission. This does not include running toward the therapist during a game of tag or running to the designated bathroom area when prompted. You are literally defining the borders of the behavior.
To help you, the listener, test your own definitions out in the field, I want to introduce a highly practical tool from the Cooper text. This actually originated from a researcher named Morris back in 1985, and it is a brilliant 3-question test you can run in your head instantly.
I love the Morris test.
It's so good. Number 1, can you count the number of times the behavior occurs in a specific period, like a 15-minute interval? Number 2, can you count the number of minutes it takes to perform the behavior? And number 3, can you tell someone the behavior occurred X number of times today?
Those 3 questions are the ultimate gatekeepers of objective measurement.
Let's test it. If you say to me, the client had a bad attitude today, okay, let's run the Morris test. Can I count the number of bad attitudes in a 15-minute interval? No.
Nope.
Can I get a stopwatch and time the exact duration of a bad attitude? Like, where does it start and stop? I can't. Can I go to the parents and say, your child emitted exactly 4 bad attitudes today?
You cannot.
Yeah.
And because the answer to those questions isn't a definitive mathematical yes, your definition is broken.
Yeah.
It has failed the test of being observable and measurable, and it must be rewritten.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I want to give you a functional metaphor to make this concept stick in your brain permanently. When you put on your badge and step into a session, I want you to think of your role as an RBT as being identical to a sports referee.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Imagine you are watching a high-stakes basketball game. The point guard drives to the hoop, there is a collision, and the referee blows the whistle. The ref stops the play, marches over to the scorer's table and the coach's bench, and announces, I'm calling a foul because your player has a bad attitude and was trying to be mean to the defender.
The crowd would riot.
They would. The coach would be absolutely furious, and rightfully so. A referee cannot, under any circumstances, call a foul based on perceived attitude, malicious intent, or an assumption about a player's emotional state.
Because they do not have access to the player's internal thoughts.
Exactly. They can only call a foul for a public, observable, measurable action that violates the specific parameters of the rule book. The referee has to say, the player struck the opponent's arm with an open hand while the opponent was in the act of shooting.
That analogy perfectly captures the essence of behavioral data collection. Just like a professional referee, an RBT does not guess why a player is acting a certain way in the middle of the game. You are not there to psychoanalyze the client. You simply act as the neutral observer, recording the specific physical actions as they happen in real time, strictly according to the rulebook. And in our case, the rulebook is the behavior intervention plan carefully written by the BCBA.
If it isn't in the rulebook, you don't blow the whistle.
Exactly. And you don't record the data point.
Now that we have the theory and the mindset established, we need to bring this down to earth. I want to walk through some real-world ABA examples to see how this plays out across different clinical environments. We are going to pull some contrasting examples directly from the Amethyst texts showing what vague, harmful terminology looks like versus excellent, scientifically sound operational definitions.
Let's do it.
Let's start in a clinic or a home setting dealing with a very common behavior, aggression. A bad session note or a bad definition would say something like he was acting out when frustrated.
We see that all the time. But acting out is an incredibly vague phrase that could mean anything from sighing heavily to throwing a television. And as we established, frustrated is a private event.
Right, it fails the Morris test.
Completely. A good, robust operational definition for that exact same scenario would be client struck the table with an open palm 3 times in a 10-minute period.
Listen to how clean that is. I wasn't in the room, but I can picture the exact movement of the hand. I know the topography was an open palm. I know the frequency was 3, and I know the time parameter was 10 minutes.
It leaves nothing to the imagination.
Exactly. Now let's shift contexts. This isn't just about explosive behaviors. The real test of an RBT's objectivity is when they are dealing with passive behaviors. Let's move to a school setting, dealing with non-compliance. A bad note might be refusing tasks because the learner is in a bad mood.
Once again, bad mood is a guess. It is minimalistic language trying to explain a lack of action.
So what's the fix?
The good definition would translate that into measurable parameters. Failure to initiate a requested task within 10 seconds of a clearly delivered instruction.
Notice the mechanical difference there. The good definition gives us a latency parameter, 10 seconds. We aren't guessing if they are stubborn, we are measuring the time between the instruction and the start of the action.
Latency is such a powerful measurement tool.
It really is. Finally, let's look at daily documentation and reporting, specifically your end-of-session notes where you are summarizing the day. A bad note, which is unfortunately very common, is client needed a lot of help today.
A lot of help means something entirely different to a first-year technician than it does to a 10-year veteran.
Totally. Does a lot of help mean you modeled the answer with flashcards? Did you have to physically guide their hands to complete a puzzle?
You just don't know. A good objective session note is mathematically precise. Client required a full physical prompt on 6 out of 8 discrete trials.
Wow, yes, the clarity is night and day.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of a client's overall care team, what is fascinating here is how those good examples instantly allow any other professional, whether it is your supervising BCBA, the school speech pathologist, an occupational therapist, or, another RBT covering your Friday shift, to visualize the session exactly as it happened.
They don't have to decode your personal slang.
Right. Or guess what a lot of help means? The data speaks entirely for itself. It becomes a universal language.
But we know that the clinic floor is chaotic and mistakes happen. So we've got these airtight definitions on paper, right? But paper doesn't throw things at you. When you're actually out in the field, what goes wrong? Where do you see RBTs typically drop the ball when they're trying to apply this objectivity in real time?
Well, based on the data in the Amethyst study guide, there are a few very common pitfalls that technicians fall into. The most frequent is, of course, what we've been hammering on, reverting to subjective, evaluative, or mentalistic language. Words like overwhelmed, angry, anxious, or stubborn sneaking into the data sheets. But the second major pitfall is a bit more subtle, and it trips up even experienced RBTs. It is counting behaviors that almost look like the target behavior, but don't actually meet the strict parameters of the operational definition. We call this topographical drift.
Topographical drift. Walk me through a scenario of topographical drift. How did that happen?
Okay, let's say the behavior intervention plan defines property destruction very specifically as throwing an object larger than a closed fist across the room.
Larger than a closed fist. Got it.
The BCBA wrote it that way because the client has a history of throwing heavy wooden blocks that can actually injure people. Now imagine you're in a session, the client gets denied access to an iPad, and they swat a single lightweight pencil off their desk onto the floor.
Okay, definitely an undesirable behavior.
It is definitely an undesirable behavior. It was definitely born out of the same context. And in the heat of the moment, you tally a mark for property destruction.
But a pencil isn't larger than a closed fist.
Exactly. You just inflated the data. The action didn't meet the specific parameters of the definition, even though your brain categorized it as bad behavior.
Oh, wow.
When the BCBA looks at the graph, they think the dangerous block-throwing behavior is increasing, when in reality it was just a pencil being dropped. The intervention decisions will now be skewed.
That is a brilliant distinction. It goes right back to the referee. If the rulebook says a foul is contact on the arm and the player yells loudly but doesn't make contact, you can't call the foul just because you didn't like the yelling.
Exactly.
What is the third major mistake?
The third major mistake is a measurement error, confusing frequency with rate. Frequency is just a raw, unadorned count of occurrences. For example, the behavior happened 10 times. Rate, however, is a count over a specific period of time. It is a ratio. The behavior happened 10 times per hour.
And why does mixing those up destroy the data?
Think about the denominator of time. If an RBT just writes down 10 occurrences in their notes, but fails to record the duration of the observation, it makes rate calculation impossible, and the data loses all its vital context.
Because 10 times in an hour is very different from 10 times in a minute.
Exactly. 10 occurrences of headbanging in a 5-minute period is a severe, life-threatening clinical emergency. 10 occurrences of headbanging spread out evenly over an 8-hour school day is still a concern, but it is a vastly different clinical picture. If you don't document the time, the raw frequency is basically useless.
It makes complete sense mechanically. I want to talk about the human element for a second. Why do you think these mistakes happen so often? Nobody wakes up, puts on their scrubs, and says, I'm going to write terrible subjective data today on purpose.
No, of course not. It usually happens because the RBT feels incredibly rushed and emotionally drained. They were trying to summarize a highly complex, emotionally charged 2-hour session into a quick 5-minute note before the parents arrive to pick up the child.
Right, the pressure is on.
It requires a lot less cognitive effort to write "he was so angry today" than it does to meticulously write out the specific topographies, the frequency counts, and the antecedents of the behavior. It is a shortcut born out of fatigue.
So how does a clinical team catch this? If I'm an RBT making these mistakes out of fatigue, how does my BCBA figure it out before the whole treatment plan derails?
Supervisors have specific, rigorous systems to correct this. When a BCBA comes to observe your session, they aren't just watching the client. They are actively evaluating your treatment fidelity. To do this, they will routinely conduct what is called an Inter-Observer Agreement Check, or IOA.
Inter-observer agreement. This is where two people measure the exact same thing at the exact same time to see if their data matches.
That is the core of it, yeah. The BCBA and the RBT will observe the exact same session, the exact same client at the exact same time, but they take data completely independently. They don't talk to each other about it.
You're just both clicking their counters.
Exactly. If, at the end of a 15-minute interval, the RBT's data sheet says the behavior happened 15 times, and the BCBA's data sheet says it happened 4 times, we have a major problem.
That's a huge discrepancy.
Huge. And that divergence means one of two things. Either the operational definition written by the BCBA is poorly constructed and ambiguous, or the RBT's understanding of that definition has drifted and needs immediate correction. IOA is the diagnostic tool for objective measurement.
Okay, we have covered the philosophy, the mechanics, and the pitfalls. Now it is time to put you, the listener, in the hot seat.
Let's do it.
Let's play a game with this. We are going to transition into testing your knowledge with 5 RBT-style multiple-choice questions directly inspired by the Amethyst mock exams. But we aren't just going to read this like a dry textbook. I'm going to pose the scenario, I'll give you the options to think about, and I want you to play along in your head and try to spot the traps the test makers are setting for you.
They love their traps.
They really do. Then, our expert will break down exactly why the correct answer is the only logical choice. Ready? Let's jump into Question 1, pulled from the concepts in Mock Exam C. Imagine a clinical team defines noncompliance as refusing tasks because of a bad attitude. The BCBA reviews this and asks for a revised definition. Which of these 4 options is the best revision? Is it A, defiant or oppositional behavior towards staff? Is it B, refusing tasks because the learner is in a bad mood? Is it C, any sign the learner is unwilling or resistant? Or is it D, failure to initiate a requested task within 10 seconds of a clearly delivered instruction?
Okay, if you were looking at the mechanics of those options, the correct answer is D. D is the only correct choice because it includes a measurable time limit, 10 seconds, and a physically observable action, which is the failure to initiate movement.
It passes the Morris test.
It passes with flying colors. Let's look at the traps and the other options. A, B, and C all rely on subjective internal terms: defiant, bad mood, and unwilling. You cannot objectively point a camera at a bad mood. You cannot put defiance on a stopwatch. They fail the Morris test completely.
Spot on. The test makers love to use words like defiant because in normal conversation we use it all the time. It feels right, but clinically it's a trap.
Definitely.
Let's move to question 2 from Mock Exam A. A new RBT is asked to collect data on a behavior labeled aggression, but the definition provided on the data sheet simply says acting out when frustrated. Why will Dr. Hahn, the supervising BCBA, immediately rewrite this definition? Is it A, it lacks a specific measurement procedure? Is it B, it uses subjective, mentalistic language, specifically the word frustrated, that cannot be reliably observed? Is it C, it does not include the function of the behavior? Or is it D, it is missing the baseline data?
The answer you want here is B. The fatal flaw in the definition itself is the use of mentalistic language.
Right.
Frustrated is a private event. It happens under the skin. It is not a public observable behavior.
But what about the other options? Don't we need those things too?
We do. Now, while options A, C, and D mention very important components of a broader, complete behavior intervention plan, those are different sections of the document. The definition itself is fundamentally broken because it tries to measure an internal emotion.
Got it. This brings us to question 3, straight from the concepts in the Amethyst text, focusing on your end-of-day notes. Which of the following is an example of an objective, observable session note? Let's listen to the phrasing carefully here. A, client did great today. B, client requested a break verbally 5 times. C, client seemed frustrated and overwhelmed by the math worksheet. Or D, client was aggressive toward their peers during circle time.
B is the correct choice here. It strips away all the fluff. It specifies the exact topography of the behavior requested a break verbally, and it includes a measurable raw count 5 times.
Simple and clean.
Exactly. Let's dissect why the others are terrible notes. Option A is purely evaluative. Great is highly subjective. A great day for one client is a terrible day for another.
Oh, that's so true.
Right. Option C uses mentalistic terms, guessing that the client was frustrated and overwhelmed. And option D is a classic novice mistake. It is just way too vague. Aggressive is an umbrella category, not an operationalized action. It needs to specify if they were hitting, kicking, or biting.
Question 4 is a big one because it tests your scope of practice, which the BACD is incredibly strict about. Here is the scenario. You are an RBT implementing a behavior plan. You are out in the field. You notice the operational definition written for tantrum doesn't actually match what the client is doing in real life. The client's behavior has evolved. What is your most ethical course of action? Is it A, independently change the definition in the data collection software so your data is more accurate? Is it B, document your physical observations in your notes and report the discrepancy directly to the supervising BCBA? Is it C, stop collecting all data on tantrums until your next supervision session next month? Or is it D, ask the caregiver how they would like you to define the behavior moving forward?
This is a critical scenario, and the correct answer is B. Designing, writing, or modifying behavior plans is strictly outside the RBT scope of practice. RBTs are tasked with implementation and reporting.
Even if you know the definition is wrong?
Even then, if we look at the structural hierarchy of a clinical team, you are operating under the professional license and direction of your BCBA. Modifying a definition independently in the software, even if you have the best intentions and you genuinely think you are being helpful, is a massive violation of your role.
You are essentially rewriting the prescription.
Exactly. The correct action is to document exactly what you are seeing and alert the architect of the plan, the supervisor, immediately so they can make the clinical adjustments.
And never ask the caregiver to rewrite clinical definitions for you. That is putting an unfair and unethical burden on the parent.
Never.
Okay, final question. Question 5. This one concerns data collection errors. Imagine an RBT accidentally forgets to collect data during a chaotic 2-hour session. To make sure the graph doesn't look empty when the BCBA checks it, the RBT enters estimated counts into the tablet based on what they generally remember happening. According to the Amethyst text, what is this an example of? Is it A, descriptive assessment? Is it B, extinction? Is it C, data fraud and a serious ethical violation? Or is it D, discontinuous measurement?
The answer is unequivocally C.
Yeah.
Altering, omitting, or backfilling data retroactively is data fraud. And I want to be very clear here, it does not matter what your intent was.
Yeah, it's a tough pill to swallow for some people.
It is. You might just be trying to fix a mistake so you don't get reprimanded. But estimating data invalidates the graph completely. It is a major violation of the BACB ethics code. Data must be recorded as it occurs in real time or not at all.
If you miss it, you miss it.
If you miss it, you miss it. An empty data point is vastly safer for the client than a fabricated one.
That last point about data fraud brings us to a crucial pivot in this deep dive. We officially call this next segment the Ethics Minute, because you cannot separate objective measurement from ethical practice. They are two sides of the same coin.
This raises an incredibly important discussion about the profound ethical obligations an RBT carries regarding documentation. I want to expand on the severity of backfilling data, because in the moment, to an exhausted technician, it might just feel like a minor clerical error.
Right, like, oh, I forgot to click the counter, I'll just add 3 tallies now because I know it happened around 3 times.
Exactly. But when you estimate data, you are fundamentally corrupting the baseline and the intervention data. Think about the chain reaction here. The BCBA logs in, looks at that estimated data, and believes it to be completely true. Based on your fabricated numbers, they might decide to implement a highly restrictive procedure, or they might discontinue a reinforcement system that was actually helping the client.
Wow.
Your data, quite literally, dictates the trajectory of a human being's life and autonomy.
That is heavy. It's a massive responsibility. But it's exactly why the ethical standards for data integrity are so uncompromising. And this ties directly back to what we were just discussing about scope of practice.
It does. As an RBT, you must remember that you operate under the license of your BCBA. Changing definitions, modifying intervention plans, or guessing the functions of a behavior based on your own subjective feelings isn't just a paperwork error, it is practicing outside your scope, and it is genuinely dangerous to the client.
You mentioned the architect earlier.
Yeah, I'll give an analogy. The BCBA is the architect, right? They design the blueprints taking into account the structural loads, the zoning laws, and the materials. The RBT is the master builder. They construct the house precisely to the blueprint. If the builder decides to move a load-bearing wall because they just felt like it looks better over there, the house will eventually collapse.
There is also an element of maintaining professional boundaries here, right? When we talk about writing subjective emotional notes, it feels like there is a risk of blurring the lines of the therapeutic relationship.
Yes, that is a fantastic point. Writing subjective, emotionally charged session notes is a symptom of losing professional objectivity. If an RBT starts writing notes like, "He was so mad at me today, I feel like he was punishing me for saying no," or "She was so sweet and grateful to me today," they're creeping dangerously close to a dual relationship mindset.
They are acting more like an emotionally involved friend or a frustrated older sibling rather than a neutral clinical professional.
Exactly. It compromises your ability to deliver effective, unbiased treatment. You have to maintain that clinical distance to be effective.
So let's flip the perspective for a moment to help our listeners understand the view from the top. Let's put on your BCBA hat. Imagine you show up unannounced to a clinic to supervise one of your RBTs. When you were standing in the corner of the room with your clipboard, what does excellent implementation of this skill actually look like during an observation?
When a supervisor is observing, they are fundamentally looking for treatment fidelity, which correlates to task of 0.08. Excellent implementation looks like a technician who is operating almost like a neutral, highly calibrated scientific instrument.
Okay, a scientific instrument.
Yes, they're recording behaviors precisely as they are defined in the plan without letting their personal feelings, the fact that they're having a bad day, or their biases alter the data collection. They don't react emotionally when the client exhibits a challenging behavior.
They just stay neutral.
Right. They observe the topography, they deliver the prompt or consequence exactly as written, and they record the data immediately. It is smooth, it is objective, and it is entirely predictable.
And on the flip side, what does poor implementation look like to a BCBA? What are the red flags?
Poor implementation is when the supervisor sees the RBT making assumptions and improvising based on emotions. For example, I might see an RBT record a target behavior as occurring, and when I ask them about it, they say, "Well, they didn't actually hit the table, but I knew what they meant. They were about to do it, so I counted it."
Oh, wow.
They counted an intention, not an action. That fails the parameters of the operational definition. Or, another red flag, is modifying the prompt hierarchy, giving the client the answer instead of letting them try, because the RBT felt bad that the client was struggling.
That's a hard one because it comes from a good place.
It does, but that lack of fidelity, born out of subjective empathy, destroys the validity of the entire intervention. You aren't doing the client any favors by pitying them. You're just muddying the data that could actually help them learn the skill.
To make sure you, our listener, never fall into that trap of subjectivity, I want to give you a memory hack. A fail-safe visualization to test your vocabulary before you ever write it down in a session note. It is called the dead camera test.
This is one of the most effective tools in the field.
Imagine you take a completely objective, non-intelligent, standard video camera, and you point it at the room where the session is happening. What will that camera capture? A camera does not have a brain. It does not have empathy. The camera cannot record frustration.
You cannot.
It cannot capture sadness, anxiety, or a bad attitude. It only records pixels and audio waves. It records physical movement through space, and it records sound. It records a human being dropping to the floor. It records the exact decibel level of a scream.
Exactly.
If a video camera cannot capture the term you are about to write down on your data sheet, your definition is flawed and you need to rewrite it.
That is an excellent visualization because it forces you to strip away the human element of interpretation. If you can only see the behavior through the lens of human emotion, it is not operationalized. You have to be the camera.
Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We have gone from the philosophy of radical behaviorism to the mechanics of data fraud. Let's synthesize all of this. Can you provide a rapid review? Break this entire deep dive down into 5 critical, rapid-fire takeaways for our listener to anchor everything we've discussed.
Absolutely. Here is your conceptual anchor. Number 1, behavior in the broadest sense encompasses both public and private events, actions, and thoughts. But in applied ABA practice, we must focus strictly on the public, observable actions.
Point 2.
Number 2, the definitions of our terms. Observable means the behavior can literally be seen or heard by another person. Measurable means it can be mathematically counted or timed. If it isn't both, it isn't usable data.
Right. And point 3.
Number 3, never use subjective, evaluative, or mentalistic words like frustrated, angry, bad mood, or stubborn in any of your clinical documentation. Be the camera.
Be the camera. Point 4.
Number 4, data must be collected in real time as the behavior occurs. Estimating or backfilling data is considered data fraud. It corrupts the treatment plan and is highly unethical.
And the final point.
Number 5, remember your scope of practice. RBTs implement the plan and report the data. If an operational definition seems poorly written, wrong, or incomplete to you, report it to your BCBA immediately. Never modify the definition or the plan yourself.
Amazing. That is the perfect summary. To wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. A challenge for you to take directly into your daily life to build this muscle memory. For the next 24 hours, I want you to try describing your own behavior and the behavior of your friends or family, strictly in observable and measurable terms.
Oh, this is a great exercise.
It's so hard. When your partner sighs and rolls their eyes at a bad joke, don't say to yourself they are annoyed. Say they just emitted a heavy exhale and shifted their gaze upward for 2 seconds.
It sounds so robotic.
It does. Notice how incredibly hard it is to strip away your assumptions about their feelings. It is a massive mental workout, but practicing this in your everyday life will make you a vastly better, more objective technician when you step into the clinic.
It really is a workout. It highlights just how deeply ingrained mentalistic language is in our culture and how much effort it takes to maintain that scientific objectivity.
It totally does. Think back to that opening scenario I gave you, finishing that grueling, exhausting session. You're looking at that muddy water, that messy, chaotic, emotional reality of human behavior. But now you have the analytical tools to filter it. You don't write, "He was frustrated." You write the data, you write the facts. You create that clear, clean X-ray of the situation so the treatment team can actually see the structure and help heal the break.
That's beautifully said.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. I hope this provided a massive amount of clarity for you. We invite you to come back and join us for the next installment of the RBT Task List series. Keep observing, keep measuring objectively, and we'll talk to you next time.